Hello!
Hi friends! Welcome back! We are at episode 3 of our Reading Tamora Pierce series. We are still in the middle of Emmeline. And this week we're actually talking about 2 of the books that are part of a series called The Circle Reforged. And those 2 books in question are going to be Battle Magic and Melting Stones.
Now, technically there are 3 books in the Circle Reforged series, but we wanted to separate the last book,
Will of the Empress, which is the last one,
and talk about these 2 because these 2 are, I guess, the most problematic in terms of timeline, and that
which I think you would be more familiar with because you
little bit more familiar. I've had the opportunity to listen to the full cast audio of one of these books, and had the opportunity to read the arc of the other one because Alexa was awesome enough to get one and send it to me back when we were still living apart, and so that was cool. And needless to say, these 2 books were actually specifically called out on Tamora Pierce's own website just to explain the timeline continuities of stuff because they are a little screwy.
So I guess we should talk a little bit about what they're about.
So let's ground ourselves.
So are you going
right?
to talk about Battle Magic, or are you going to talk about Melting Stones?
Well, we'll talk about where we last ended up, right? So the last time we saw our 4 mages, so previously on Reading Tamora Pierce,
which, by the way, the links to those 2 videos, episode 1 and episode 2, down below.
In roughly the same year of their 14th year, all 4 of them are scattered across the globe. They have found mage students that they need to train now because they are accredited mages with their own mage kits and all.
Yeah.
And 4 years, I want to say, after that, they come back to Emmeline, right, for like a reunion. Now that's really, and so publication order wise, what happened was right after the last 4 books were published, a book came out called Will of the Empress, that takes place 4 years afterwards, from that particular, split timeline and everybody.
So technically that one makes like the...
Yeah, so that was the entire, Emmeline series at the time. It was amazing, it tied it off. We'll talk about that last because that was really, for me, the culmination of the 4.
But then,
after that,
the next
a book came out cause Melting Stones.
It was an audiobook.
Which is an audiobook first, full cast audio, very, very fun. I still have it somewhere in my files because my uncle got it for me, like on his iTunes, and I'm like, can I have this one? And he's like, okay, fine, just download it. I'm like, yay.
I haven't listened to the audio, which I think would be really fun.
As usual, like all full cast audio is really awesome fun. One of my dreams is to collect all of them.
So timeline-wise, where is Melting Stones?
Melting Stones happens absolutely concurrently with Will of the Empress.
Okay.
So if you've got
the 4
circle opens, the Circle of Magic, and then the circle opens, and then you've got Will of the Empress. Melting Stones happens like simultaneously, up or down.
So Melting Stones is actually centered on Evie.
And her journey.
She and Rosethorn.
Yeah, in a nutshell, she and Rosethorn have to go to the Battle Islands to go look at some dead trees.
That's really a nutshell. There's a lot more going on,
That's a small,
obviously.
tiny
No,
nutshell.
but that's really the basic premise.
Really the basic premise of it.
They go to the Battle Islands to look at dead trees.
Exactly. And then, and of course, so
years later,
so interesting. So concurrently happening, right, is we have Evie, and this is why this whole video today is really more centered around Evie, Briar, and Rosethorn, because with Melting Stones, which is the first book that came out after, Will of the Empress, we see Evie recovering from, just like Briar, and we'll talk about it eventually, recovering from the aftermath of a war in Yanjing that they had experienced. At the end of Street Magic, they said that we would go back to Yanjing, go to Evie's old stomping grounds as a child, see what that's like.
Yeah, well,
and they encountered easily the worst thing ever that anybody could encounter.
They ended up experiencing every single possible thing you can imagine that occurs during a war.
And it's alluded to in Will of the Empress during Briar's bit. And now here we have Evie's part of it as well. And so those happen concurrently. And so that was big and heavy and awesome, and we'll talk about Melting Stones in just a bit. But because that was such a moving and very visceral kind of story, I was not surprised at all that years later, Tamora Pierce comes out with Battle Magic, which is a retelling of that traumatic time in Yanjing and Gyeongshae.
Boy, is it traumatic.
It's the heaviest thing.
Not the best idea.
I warned Alexa. I'm like, you gotta.
I read it on a plane, guys. I was like, why am I doing this to myself?
And easily one of her best books.
Oh
yet.
No, yeah, I definitely think it's actually one of the strongest she's ever written.
And again, Briar, Evie, and Rosethorn, right? So I could almost have the Briar, Evie, and Rosethorn. I want to call it the Briar Quartet, really.
So it's basically Briar, Evie, and Rosethorn, and like mentioned, they were traveling in Yanjing, and they find themselves caught in the middle of I guess you would call it a civil war almost, because it's two neighboring territories. Almost neighboring territories.
No, it's definitely a border war, because
border war, then.
It's almost okay. So if Gyeongshae was actually probably butchering that, was sort of played out to be kind of like Tibet, very the high up in the mountains and a spiritual place, and all the gods come here.
And then China,
and
right?
Kind of China, Imperial China, Japan, Korea. That would be Yanjing. Very fascinating. Wanted to invade, and they were caught in the middle of it, and so I personally, this is just me personally, I would like
actually my favorite.
The Briar and Rosethorn Quartet are technically Briar's book that leads straight into Street Magic, that leads straight into Battle Magic, and then eventually Melting Stones, because it does follow kind of the adventures and misadventures of Briar and Rosethorn.
Okay. So now that you've kind of explained the timeline and sort of talked about how you love that this is a Briar and Rosethorn Quartet, I want to say that I think I enjoyed Melting Stones because I liked Evie as a character, but I really, really loved Battle Magic, which I was not expecting considering how heavy the subject matter is.
God, was it
I think
so
it's
heavy.
just such a remarkably crafted story. And I think that she did such a good job with the characters in it. Like,
and the lore, it's
just so unexpected, and in a way where like you knew that was something that they had all experienced, but you didn't quite understand the gravity of it. And then when you read this book, you're like, holy shit, that was.
And the thing is, if you read the books in chronological order, you'll get a good sense of the emotional kind of journeys for everybody, because they really close that out. But if you read it in publication order, you're gonna see just the lore that Tamora Pierce created in Emelon just go all the way up.
Which you've read it both ways now, right?
I've read it both ways.
I've only read it the one way, which is chronological order.
So you've got the growth of the ambient mages concept by seeing new ambient mages and the circle opens, right? And then it ups a bit with Will of the Empress, because you get to see the culmination of our 4 ambient mages, and then Melting Stones, where you're like, oh my gosh, there's more to that than, and who is this new character? And then finally, Will of the Battle Magic, where you're like, my goodness, how could she have come up with such a rich kind of unifying lore for everything?
So considering that the publication order isn't the same chronological order as the stories, obviously there are definitely like things in the
timelines are a little screwy.
Don't seem to make sense.
Like Rosethorn will say in Melting Stones, I'm 6 months from a war, and then you think that so much time has passed between them coming back from Yanjing, and
it's very interesting.
So my personal suggestion would be just take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it's just go into knowing this already.
Yeah, if you're not too picky timeline wise, you at least can preserve the order of Battle Magic happened first, and then Will of the Empress happens roughly at the same time as Melting Stones, and then you can just leave it at that.
I will say that one other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of like the books themselves, it's interesting to me because even though there's a gravity to what happens in Melting Stones, it's not quite as heavy as Battle Magic.
It's nothing.
Like which is like it makes sense, but also like at the same time it's kind of weird reading it like that, because like I was reading one and then I'm like,
it's a violent shift in tone, and I made the mistake. And Radum, by the way, if you watch the other videos, I'll say that it's actually Battle Magic and Melting Stones and Will of the Empress. You could, because you want to see Evie's through line, but really, I
think you should read Will actually, right after
Battle Magic, so that way you get to follow Briar's through line, and then when you see that resolve, you have enough of a mindset to go into Evie's. Because what I love about, and we can segue into Melting Stones now.
Yes. So like we said, it's basically Evie and Rosethorn off on a mission to visit the Battle Islands and look at dead trees. It makes it sound so jolly, but really it's not. It's a serious thing because those dead trees are also, the other signs that are appearing on the island are like acidity in the lakes, in the lake water, a loss of magical power.
Yeah.
And a couple of other things. So serious effects on this island. It is not a jolly like adventure. No, it's not that. What I think is enjoyable about Melting Stones is it's the first time that it really focuses on a mage character that is not one of the original 4.
That's right.
Which is so fascinating to me.
And not even one of the original 4's teachers. And really, there's really only
yeah,
one
because
story.
Rosalind like appears, but she's not always around.
And she gets her own piece in Battle Magic too, which is a treat.
But yeah, Melting Stones
But
first.
Melting Stones is really
yeah, so that is interesting. I think it would be interesting. I think it's interesting that Tamora Pierce chose to do that, because I don't necessarily think, like, I love Evie. She's my favorite, obviously, of that.
Yeah, if I was gonna
read a story.
Yeah, like I said, we're not gonna do, like, if you watched our other video, you hear me say that the Keth and Triss show ran for 1 season, and that was fine.
That's fine. We're done.
No need for that. I wouldn't like a Nico the younger years, the way we have a Numair the younger years for Tamora Pierce.
I don't really need to read a Jory and Nia story.
I don't need.
I would read a Pasco one though. That one I would actually read one.
I just have this terrible, like, semi-noir piece of, like, kind of like this weird gumshoe kind of deal where he's like, and so I did a couple of tippy-tap steps here and there and boom, disarmed them, and it was
just back to noir.
I know, it's just this terrible.
But yeah, so if any character was going to be given their own book, I think Evie's a good choice.
Evie would be the perfect one.
It's just interesting that she would choose to give Evie that story. But then again, this story could not have been about anyone other than Evie.
That is also true.
Because it's very specific what happens in it.
And interesting
in relation to her.
And for me, if you've grown to love Evie at all, and if you so can you imagine reading Melting Stones after reading The Will of the Empress and knowing only from Briar's own PTSD, which you will see heavily in Will of the Empress, that Evie must have suffered something terrible as well, because she was right there with him, but you didn't know exactly what. Evie is barely mentioned in Will of the Empress, so for her to just casually mention the terrible things that happened to her without battle magic happening yet, like that hasn't been written, but to allude to it in Melting Stones was insane. Like it was, and so to be invested in that kind of thing and see how she's recovering from her scars, both physical and emotional.
It's a very neat and tidy story too. Like it ends on like a very neat note. It's very like
pretty really explosive, I would like to say.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Ho ho. Sorry, terrible joke.
Yeah, so I thought it was enjoyable. It's not my favorite of the Circle books, I'll admit that, but I did think it was enjoyable. I did enjoy, like, there is a character I really love in that book, but I don't want to talk about that character because that character is best talked about in Battle Magic. So we're not going to talk about that, but suffice to say, there is a character that I also love that is not Evie and not Rosethorn.
And again, from a publication order perspective, this character shows up out of nowhere. Literally just nowhere. And you're like, who? What the hell? What? And then you figure out, and then you read Battle Magic and you're like, ah.
Okay.
But seriously, it is the most out of left field character that you will ever find in the history of
still fun though.
New character. But still fun, because he's just like there, and he's like talking. By the way, I still remember his voice from the full cast audio. And he always has this deep, gravelly, kind of like, there is a problem with this. It can't do it, but but bless you, whoever you were voice actor for this new character.
I love that Melting Stones is connected to the others, but it's also the kind of story you could read on its own.
That's true, though. Of course, you would benefit from knowing the universe. Otherwise, who cares about some random girl from Yanjing who has stone magic?
Yeah.
But there's a lot, so you can't read Melting Stones outside of the actual Quartet. So it's really more a companion book.
You know how Maki was like, he warned me that it was going to be a dark and heavy book? Yeah, surprisingly, I really loved it. And not only did I love it, it is one of the very few 5-star books that I gave 5 stars to this year. Which I think is like a very important thing. I think it's because the writing is incredible, that's one thing. The character development in the story for Rosethorn, Briar, and Evie is handled so beautifully and so...
It almost, and I say this with much love, it almost eclipses Will of the Empress.
And he loves Will of the Empress.
The only reason Will of the Empress for me still remains the top is because it solves... Yeah, because the 4 of them are all there. But the stakes of Battle Magic, okay, so if Melting Stones was, Evie recovering from her time with the Yanjing War and solving why there are dead trees on the Battle Islands, kind of adventure romp deal, Battle Magic is basically them getting stuck in the middle of this terrible campaign being waged against Gyeongshae.
Like we said, it is heavy because you can't expect a book that is about war to not have that sort of heavy emotional cloak all over it, because there's death and there is destruction and there is all of this subterfuge and separations and all of this like intensely emotional situations
caused by one individual, by the way, which was, and this individual I'm talking about is the Emperor of Yanjing. He is alluded to in The Will of the Empress, but to have him, you know, meet him in person and have him see him do all these terrible things, it's his fault. Like, the only reason to heavily emotional is because he's a terrible human being, basically.
I think the other thing that makes it so difficult to read is that Briar and Evie, to me, are still so young to be experiencing this, to be on the front lines of it, really, and to have the ability to do something about it, but to, you know, they're still young. They have so much to learn. They have so, like, they have never, I don't think any of them have ever actually, but specifically those who, like, to have them who are both still in a phase where they're learning and growing and, you know, growing into themselves, especially Evie, be on the front lines and have to wield what magic they have to do what they can. It's so intense and terribly sad, and they're
non-combative. I mean,
yeah, all of them.
Sure, Rose Thorn and Briar have managed to, like, you know, make weaponize their seedlings and Briars.
But that's still not the same as being actually trained to be a warrior, a fighter in a war, and I think that's something that's really got an impact on their own emotional through lines in this story.
I just, like, I'm writing fan fiction in my head right now that all 4 of them are in Gyeongshae. Now that
would have been epic, though.
Would have been, like...
Also, it would have ended a lot faster. I'm just saying.
That's true, though. It just...
I mean, literally, you could have just brought Triss and it would have ended a lot faster.
It's true. They would have shut that down, but,
yeah, what I think, aside from, like, being impressed by the writing and the character development, I also think that, you know, the way that she ties this new world to the old one is very well done. Like,
Agreed.
We still have, like, elements that you would recognize from previous Circle books, but there's a lot of new stuff, obviously, because we don't know what Yanjing is like, and we don't know what their power structure is like, and so we learn about all of that in the books.
And the lore kind of increases, and so, and of course, and here's, and again, the lore behind it, right? So Gyeongshae is the source of the circle, you know, the circle, I would say, religion, right? That's where all the religions come to roost, basically. All of the gods visit that place. So it's this kind of, like, you know, mythical, fabled place of power. And of course the Emperor of Yanjing was like, I gotta get that. And that's really where the thing starts. And so for them to protect this place from this terrible conquering emperor, and be caught in the middle of that is what the entire plot is basically all about. And it seems simple, but my gosh, it's
funny too, because, like, that book starts out a bit slow.
Very slow, actually.
It's so slow at the start, and you kind of don't know where it's building up to, but it's so worth it to just keep on reading. Because there comes a point where it crescendos, and you're like, cannot stop now.
Too fast.
Gotta go. And then, like, everything happens all at once, and you're
pretty much basically like a roller coaster with a really, like, tall kind of lead in, and you're like, what's going on? And then suddenly it is all downhill from there. And that's really what war is. I mean, it breaks out, and then you have no choice but to do it. And so
good. So good. And such a good book.
And again, the special treats are not just that you get more of Evie and Briar, but you get a POV from Rose Thorn too. I think it's the only book that you get to see Rose Thorn's POV.
Yeah, and it's really well done too.
It's and you know what? Just so many
feelings.
And I will say this about Tamora Pierce's writing: she is a master at saying things just matter-of-factly, but then you as the reader get to inform the subtext and the context and the implications of that simple.
Oh yeah, I agree.
You know, word, like she'll say something simple like, and she put her arms around him, and that's basically it. But then you know that was so significant and that meant something, and she does that all the time. And Battle Magic is the last, oddly enough, the last book she wrote in the Avalon series, and is the crowning achievement, I think.
Actually, I think so. She should be very proud of that book. So, you know how Maki was talking about how it's basically the Briar and Rose Thorn series? Well, it will not surprise any of you to know that this week we are going to be talking about Briar.
That's right.
Briar's history is that he is a former street rat, basically. His street name was Roach, and he was a thief in a gang, and he got caught
Lord
twice.
Gave him that name, actually.
Yeah, he got caught twice, which means 2 X's. And
the third X will get you a hard time.
And then he got caught the third time, but before he was sentenced to become a laborer on the docks, he was rescued by Nico and taken to
Niclaren Goldeye, for those of you who are tracking with us right now. Nico is a famous great mage from who graduated the Academy of Lightsbridge.
And he takes Briar over to Winding Circle, and of course Briar at first is very non-receptive to his new surroundings because first of all, he cases the joint. Let's be honest. He cases the joint. No,
he cases the joint. He knows all of the escape routes.
He knows the escape routes. He knows where he can get
sneaks blades into his
he
pillows.
He still feels like there's a lack of security there. Like he's
for sure. Like,
afraid.
He just can't trust.
And he also knows where all the food is. So, you know.
That Briar actually has a very special bond with anyone who cooks. Specifically for Winding Circle, I want to say Dedicate Gorse. What's up?
Yeah.
Is special. Like I feel like I need to have that gift where I have to be friends with a cook so that I can get all the good stuff.
So obviously that's Briar's history. He's not educated like the others, and
but he is street
knows
smart.
Nothing but, you know, how to survive on the streets. And the thing is, he's a survivor. And so in his new circumstances, eventually he also finds it within himself to want to survive whatever he's living through. And he's fascinated by the fact that his actual connection to plants is an actual form of magic.
Which kind of almost, so imagine this, to paint the picture, right? So you've got that kind of tough, wildly survivor type deal, scrappy, takes no nonsense, you know, very wily. But then he will literally talk to a patch of moss or like a flower or a shrub. He will talk to it like it's a person. I think that's one of the reasons why Rosethorn loves him, like from the start. Like, he's swaggery and he doesn't care, but then he's like, I will talk to this plant like it's a real person. That's so unique to me. I don't know anybody who's like that, and he's not infantile about it too. He doesn't coo and go, ooh, what? No, he just talks to it like, hey, look at you, are you all right? He'll talk to every plant like it's a person. And I think that's so unique and endearing to Rosethorn.
This is obviously going straight into his abilities. Briar is a plant mage, and one of the things he can do is speak with plants in a way. He kind of gets a sense from them of what they need or what they want,
what they're all about, what they don't like.
Yeah, so basically they're like real persons to him, and he treats them like that.
Yeah, there's like a hint of a soul there that he's able to tap into.
Connected, yep.
And that's his ability. He can call life to it. He can call life from it.
Yeah.
Accelerate the growth of things. Accelerate the potency of it.
Things he can learn from Rosethorn, who is also a mage.
You know, just draw magic from the plants, right? And so there's that.
And it's interesting too, because like the older he gets, he also becomes more book smart, because he also learns all of these things, like what different plants are for, what different herbs are for, what mixtures to put together.
And you would think that it was just because, and he blames Rosethorn's, you know, strictness for it, but
it's really not, because he loves plants.
And so there's this one scene where and for those of you who already read this by now, he's rattling off like, you know, this plant does this, and it's for that sickness, and it's for pregnancy, and for breastfeeding, and for this, and he goes, how the hell does anybody remember all of that? And I think one of the sisters is like, well, he just did, and he blames Rosethorn, but really I think he's just really smart.
He is actually. He just never had the chance to explore that growing up, I think.
So and as an added bonus, his actual intelligence coupled with his thieving skills make him a pretty good alchemist. Because he has the steadiest hands of anybody. He was very useful during the plague because he would not let the magic touch anything and combine things. And so he's a very talented herbalist because he remembers the formulas and his hands are steady enough to concoct them. So that's kind of cool. He's kind of like a pharmacist slash botanist slash florist slash shotgun.
Also, he sort of has a thing where he sells miniature trees and they bring different abilities into a house, and I think that's so cool because I love the idea of that. It's like bonsai
trees basically, and so he's gotten pretty wealthy from that. So, and he's a businessman.
So that's great.
So
in terms of personality, I guess you could say that Briar is very shrewd.
He's
smart.
Shrewd.
He's kind of mouthy and kind of sassy, but in the later books you'll realize he only does it on purpose sometimes to either fit in or to really just annoy Rosethorn, because you know that's the thing.
And semi-spoiler for Will of the Empress, he's quite the ladies' man.
Oh yeah. He's also super protective though. See, this is where the big brother thing comes in for me, because he's the kind of person who's like extra protective of people who are younger than him, which is weird to notice. Yeah, that's what happens in the Plague book. That's also what happens in Street Magic, multiple times, mind you.
Yeah, I mean, he's still got that gang mentality where if you're one of mine.
Yeah, he's basically
one of
like,
his mates.
He's definitely gonna come to your aid. Like that's just who he is.
Yeah, looks out for you, and so yeah, so he's definitely got that sense of family. In that.
I also think he's the funniest. Just like his remarks are funny to me.
Yeah, he's definitely the snarkiest one.
Because he definitely makes the snarkiest.
Sandra's
too nice.
Which is perfect.
Sandra would never do that. Triss is close, but she kind of.
Triss is just prickly.
Yeah.
But that Briar has kind of like that sly kind of wit.
God, I just love Briar
It's
so
just perfect that he gets paired up with Rosethorn, who will
so
run circle all over him. So that was fun.
Okay. Speaking of pairings, let's talk about Briar's relationships with other people.
Right.
So Briar and Sandra are about as far from each other as.
And yet, there's.
You know how Sandra wins him over? When she defends him immediately after he takes that tiny tree.
Exactly. So for those of you who've already read it, Briar steals his first shotgun, his shotgun, from Delicate Crane, who is Rosethorn's
who eventually becomes
rival.
his friend, which
in
I
a
think
sense,
is funny.
yeah, they become colleagues in that sense, right? But at that time, and Sandra defends him.
She was the first one. She was like, out the door.
And to claim that basic kind of gang mentality of one of my mates is in trouble, you are not gonna.
And I think that resonated with him. So
yeah, and so he's like, why would she stick her neb out for me? And she did.
It was like a grudging sort of respect. Plus, I think like with Sandra, she was actually one of the only people who didn't think about him being a thief.
Right.
Because like, you know how the other two were kind of like, oh, he's a thief. Meanwhile, Sandra's just like.
And that's what he respects the most out of Sandra, I think, is that Sandra's ability to stand up for them.
Yeah.
And claim them as their own, and so.
And again, I think it's also just Sandra being kind, because that's not something he's used to either.
And the respect and the respect that if he decided to go head to head with Sandra, she will give him as good as
pretty much.
So,
like she is not afraid to do that.
Not afraid at all, and I think that's part of the respect that he has. That Sandra is a force to be reckoned with, and there's some mad respect there.
Okay, how about Daja and Briar? They have an interesting relationship. And
they are
they're like the bro TP.
They're the bro TP of this group.
Because I think you see that most in what do you call it, Daja's book.
You see it was in Daja's book.
Because they kind of have this.
Well, they both get into scrapes together, right? And so, and they have very well practiced routines of people challenging them or being bullies, and they each have this whole way to kind of goad the enemy so that they can knock them off guard or whatever, catch them off guard. And so to have that dynamic with Daja is they're the most level-headed. When real danger comes in, they're the most calm. Yeah. Because they've seen real danger. Right?
Yeah.
Unlike Triss and Sandra, who are not used to that kind of a lifestyle. So definitely the Bro TP, definitely the Bruiser Brigade.
Oh my gosh, they're the Bruiser Brigade. Oh my gosh, I love that.
They're the Bash brothers.
Oh yeah, that's
totally of the four, and so there's that. Very level-headed, very cool, and that's their deal.
And then of course there's Triss and Briar, which we kind of talked about last week. But again, just have to stress the fact that they are
so we talked about.
I just love that they're like the two prickliest ones, and obviously that's one thing that would cause them to fight a lot, but also cause them to get along eventually.
Interestingly enough, Briar would be the least one that Triss would trust.
Yeah.
The least one. But at one point in time, he wins her over. Do you remember how does he win her over? Because I do know that she offers to teach. Triss actually wins him over by offering to teach him to read in exchange for, I guess, fighting lessons.
No, lockpicks.
Lockpicks.
Wasn't it? Didn't she teach him? Didn't he teach? He taught all of them actually how to pick locks.
But I think Triss was the only one who really kind of.
No, because remember she has them with her.
Right. Triss is in recorded history. Triss is the only one who still carries her lockpicks and actually uses them. So
aside from Evie, obviously.
So that's a really cute kind of thing where.
I think what they mutually had that they recognize in each other more so than the other two is their the loneliness.
And the survival instinct.
And the survival instinct. Because like, these are two people who have made their own way in the world for so long. And the fact is, it's hard for them to trust each other, and in a way that makes them even more likely to be friendly with each other, because if he knows he can't trust her and she thinks she can't trust him, it's just like, oh, so our relationship is at a stalemate. We're equals.
Yeah, and yet they manage to kind of find that trust.
And I think like, for them, like, once they see that the other's actions are, you know, they're showing that they are trustworthy or that they are worthy of,
one olive branch after the other, you know,
and that's where their relationship builds. They're the ones who I think are most like siblings, actually, because it's
oddly enough, and depending on the day, which one of them is older. Yeah,
really.
and for Briar, you know, to actually, you know, he has
like
pet names for
her.
Yeah,
Copper
Curls,
That's my favorite
right?
nickname for Briar.
And for him to call out that she, you know, is attractive in her own way, and you know, it's sort of a nod to him going, yeah, you know what, you're okay, you're fine. Even if Triss, you know, has her own insecurities about, you know, being the plump one and whatever. I
just love their relationship. I think they're my favorite.
They're my favorite of the pairing.
Of the 4 mages. But then, of course, we have to talk about Briar and Rosethorn.
Oh my god.
Obviously, by far our favorite relationship.
The amount of tears that I have shed.
They definitely started as teacher and student, because Rosethorn was snappy and snarky and strict,
but again,
and Briar was kind of stubborn.
Well, not around Rosethorn.
Well, he only hung around her for the plans. It was eventually when he realized, like, it's funny because you actually see it happen because you're reading all of the Circle of Magic books.
And the thing about Rosethorn is that she made it very clear that she hates, like, no, not hate, but she does not like children. You know, that she likes plants better than people.
And yet.
But then the thing that I think endears Briar to her is that Briar again talks to plants. Like he really treats them.
He genuinely loves plants, like genuinely.
And I don't think Rosethorn has seen anyone treat plants that way.
Her mutual love and respect for the plants.
Yeah, I mean, and even Crane, who makes them grow out of season in his greenhouse, is the closest thing that Rosethorn has to, you know, plant-friendly people. But Briar is the one who's like, my God, a child after my own heart. And he minds her every single word, takes everything she says seriously. There's this one of my favorite scenes is so they're there. She knows that Briar loves plants, and he just keeps asking her about plants, and she's just rapid fire talking, and she's ladling more food onto his plate. I
love it.
And then Lark kind of just gives Rosethorn a look, and she's like, really, you're being nice to that? She's like, he's a growing boy, shut up. And just, you know,
it's funny because it's such it starts off so reluctantly, and then those two, like, they would kill and die for each other. That is literally
what happened. It's literally what happened at the end of Briar's book.
I love their relationship. I love that they're like bound together by something that's even stronger than
blood and even the teacher.
It's like the best form of found family that I've ever encountered.
That's true though. I'm thinking
with an adult.
I'm trying to think of found families right now, and I've yet to find a more visceral emotional relation. Like, makes me emotional, like, you know, and compared to other characters, is that they can be emotional about their bond and I wouldn't care too much. But I personally am invested in Briar and Rosethorn.
Yeah, I love it.
And it goes back to Tamora Pierce's writing style, where she can just say things like matter-of-factly, but then you as the reader have the implication and put the context and go, my God, that is so meaningful to me. And so that's Briar and Rosethorn for me.
Of course, their family would not be complete if we did not talk about Evie.
Baby sister.
Briar basically adopts Evie as if she were his own little sister, and I think, and I've said this before in the Circle Opens video that we did, one of the reasons why those two get along so well is because they have sort of a similar background. They both grew up on the streets, basically had to fend for themselves. While Briar chose eventually to join a gang and Evie did not, it still doesn't matter because the hierarchy, I guess, of the streets that they lived in are very similar. I love the fact that Evie does not, like, she will literally just say what she thinks to Briar, and Briar's just gonna be like, what do I do with you? And of course Rosethorn has that satisfaction of knowing that he gets to go through exactly the same thing that she probably went through years ago.
Interestingly enough, the Briar teaching Evie table manners is like the funniest thing.
And to read, that was really
next to petty Rosethorn, I love cackly Rosethorn. When Rosethorn cackles about something, you know there's something funny about that. And so to have Briar kind of teach Evie like the ropes around, this is how you eat, this is how you dress properly, and Rosethorn's like,
here's how to read, this is what your magic's like.
You're the one doing it. That's the funny part. And that's all three of them. They will say what comes to mind. They're not disparaging.
Yeah.
But they will call something out for what it is.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so
I just love that he adopted her, basically, and he's like always seeing to her needs. It's always like making sure that aside from taking care of Rosethorn, he also now takes care of Evie, because they're like the two women in his life apart from his friends.
That is true.
Like they're his family. Like the others are his friends. They're his family.
Yeah, and there is a bond between him and the other girls as sisters.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of...
But it's not anything as visceral
like
as
this.
It's that's why the Briar, Rosethorn, and Evie...
Battle magic.
Right.
Just read Battle Magic. The end.
You're right, and so...
That's basically the culmination of it. Just read Battle Magic.
Yeah, for the last video, the only takeaway that you had was Triss's Mage Kit as her hair.
This one is just read
Battle Magic, because that is the culmination of the Rosethorn, Evie, and Briar, like, series. So there's
okay, so that is it for today. We hope you enjoyed hearing us talk about Melting Stones and Battle Magic. And if you have questions, or if you just want to share what you thought of those books, feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, next week is the last Emelon video. We'll be talking about Will of the Empress and Daja, so you have that to look forward to. And if you've missed any of the previous videos, everything is linked down below. We hope you guys have been enjoying our Reading Tamora Pierce series. I know we have been enjoying rereading everything and getting to like basically talk about everything we want to when it comes to these books. So yeah, till next time, bye!